If you have a smart speaker, you have access to the entire world of NPR and St. Louis Public Radio. All the latest news and all the captivating stories. Activate our voices with yours by telling your smart speaker to play St. Louis Public Radio.
Fred Wessels spent decades trudging through the treacherous swamp that is St. Louis politics, and now he's taking his talents to Jefferson City. The St. Louis Democrat joins us next on another edition of Politically Speaking.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
I think that is fair to
As I
say.
say, hands to kiss and babies to shake. But
I think my record speaks for itself.
That's a really good question.
Welcome to the Politically Speaking podcast. I'm your host, Jason Rosenbaum, a reporter with St. Louis Public Radio. Joining me in studio in St. Louis is
colleague Joe Mannies.
And it's Wesselsmania here in the Politically Speaking podcast because we're
all whipped up over Wessels.
We have as our guest
Fred Wessels,
the state representative-elect for which numbered district, by the way?
District 81, which is in the southeast part of the city of St. Louis.
And that was going to be my next question. What does this district encompass for our listeners who don't know, possibly listeners who may be your future constituents?
Well, let's say it runs from part of Crandall area, Holly Hills, Dutchtown, and all the way up to Marine Villa and Benton Park.
Oh, okay.
So it's basically a southeast St. Louis-based district.
Exactly.
The mighty southeast part. Didn't you used to live in southeast St. Louis City,
Yes,
Joe?
I did. Just a little area, Kosciuszko Street. We overlooked the river. It was actually, we had a fantastic view from our walk up. It was a beautiful area. It's had some trouble since then, but fabulous old house, and the artist who owned the building lived below us. So
sounds like it might have been Marine Villa.
Yes, actually, we were just like in. Yes, and it was intriguing area there. Now, for many of our listeners, I assume you know, but if you don't, Representative-elect Wessels is a longtime political activist in the city of St. Louis, longtime alderman. Ran for state treasurer a few years back.
City treasurer.
City treasurer.
I know I know you're ambitious, but I don't think you were that. You're not like one of your predecessors, Tom Villa, who did run for state treasurer.
Sorry,
Exactly.
Brain. This happens, Jason, when you're older. Sometimes
it turned into an entertaining moment. But continue, Joe.
Okay, so go ahead and tell us a little bit about your background, including the all-important question of where you went to high school.
Okay, well, I born and raised in South City, the St. Anthony's grade school, Catholic grade school, Catholic high school, St. Mary's High School in South Grand, St. Louis University, bachelor's degree in business administration, master's degree in urban affairs. Got a job at St. Louis City Hospital. Got into hospital administration. I went to Saudi Arabia for a couple years with the University of Colorado Medical School. We had a project there to open a large teaching hospital in Riyadh, the capital of Saudi Arabia.
When was this?
This is 1980 through 82.
Okay.
And to train Saudis to operate it, and during our 2-year contract. So I came back to St. Louis in 80 to 82. It was actually 82 to 84. I was in Saudi Arabia. Came back, was offered a job as executive director of the St. Louis Peregrine Society, which is an organization that provides services to cancer patients in St. Louis City and County. Filed for the Board of Aldermen, was elected in 1985, and re-elected in elections until 2014, when Mayor Slay appointed me as director of community development, and I was there 2 years, and then retired from the city February 29th of this year. Filed for the state representative's job on the next day, March 1st.
I got to ask this question because there was a talk for a while that Sam Dotson was going to run for mayor and keep his job as police chief. As somebody who basically had to give up his job to run for state rep, and your job was a six-figure job and a very important job, I know this is kind of retrospective, but did you watch that entire situation kind of in amazement that you basically had to give up your city position, but Dotson wasn't able to? I'm curious about that.
Well, I knew when I took the job, that's the deal. And that's the deal for any director in the city. You can't file for, not only be elected, you can't file for a political office and be a city director.
Yeah.
And to me, chief of police is on the same level in many respects as a city director. So I was surprised. First of all, I was surprised that there was a state law allowing first responders to essentially supersede the city charter. And I was surprised that the chief didn't spot the problem himself.
Well, he eventually did because he's not running for mayor anymore.
Now, but I mean, and again, I may be blanking out a little bit here, but did Harmon step down as police chief when he ran for mayor?
Harmon was, my recollection is Harmon was retired.
Because I
From
think, yeah, but he
police
must have
department.
just have. I mean, because I covered him as
Yeah,
as chief, and then when he ran,
Yeah, and I
in
didn't.
97.
I didn't really want to get too in depth on this because again, it's a retrospective
Yeah,
question.
but you brought it up.
But I brought it up because when that happened, I was thinking about your situation because again, you're being CDA director is not like a do nothing job. It's an incredibly important job that doles out community development block grants. You get aldermen bothering you probably at all hours of the day, but it's also very rewarding when you see that money go into the communities. And, you took a risk by leaving that job to run for this job. So I just thought about that. Yeah.
Now, I covered City Hall in the late 70s, and then I was in Washington and then came back about the time you were elected to Board of Aldermen. One of the interesting things for me is that the CDA, if you take inflation into account, if the federal money to the CDA for the Community Development Agency had kept up with inflation, they'd be getting over $100 million a year. And I mean, so it's changed so much from the late 70s how much federal money goes out to help cities. From your perspective, when you were CDA director, and the fact that you had been in the Board of Aldermen back in the 80s even, when there was more money going through, were there any thoughts you had as far as how you target the money or how the urban needs have changed? And this leads up to how this might help you in Jeff City. But I am just interested in your take on that because of the changes in the program over the decades.
Well, be perfectly frank with you, Joe. One of the reasons I was asked to go to CDA was to make some changes on how the money was distributed. Needed to be done on a competitive, transparent basis, and that's what we've done for the last 3 years. So I think you're absolutely right. The amount of money, the amount of federal block grant money that's available to cities now is a fraction of what it was 30 years ago. So what we need to do, and what we're on track to do now, is to spend it more effectively, get more leverage out of the projects that we do fund, and do it in a non-political way. Actually, I was kind of shocked that the aldermen, when I took over at CDA, I expected a lot of pushback and a lot of complaints because we were distributing money on the best projects and not on the basis of geography.
Annually, how much were you getting while you were head?
We were getting $17 million.
Okay, just to put this in perspective, just so people know, when I covered City Hall in the late 70s, the city was getting close to $40 million a year in CDA money.
And that's in 1970s money.
Yeah, and that's in 1970s money. That's just to put this in perspective. Go on.
Yeah. And it's been about 16 or 17 million now for, probably 4 or 5 years at least. Now, who knows what it'll be with the
President-elect Trump.
new situation.
Let's not go there.
But still, when you look at the projects that you're doing, are there particular things that you tried to focus on? And now that you're going to be going to Jeff City, is some of that going to play into what your focus is going to be in Jeff City.
Well, I'm not sure how it's going to. I think the issues that I'm going to be looking at in Jefferson City are going to be different from the ones that different from housing and urban development.
Why? I'm just curious.
I think I've looked at. First of all, this is a work in progress as far as what I'm going to be doing in Jefferson City. I think I'm going to look at leveraging Republican support and going after more bipartisan issues. For instance, the disabled issues, mental health issues, issues that I think we can. I think there's more bipartisan support on. I've put a bill in for the drug registry. Opioid is a big problem in Missouri. We're the only state in the union that doesn't have a drug registry program. Mm-hmm. It's a first bill. It's the only bill I filed on December 1st when pre-filing began.
Yeah, and just for our listeners, the problem of getting that bill passed has not been in the House, because I think that versions of that have passed the House.
Yes.
The problem has been that once it gets to the Senate, Senator Rob Schaaf, who is a Republican from St. Joseph, has basically said he's not going to let it pass unless you put a referendum clause on it. And he doesn't philosophically believe in a drug registry. And I know there's been a lot of coverage of this issue, and it's a serious issue, but the blunt truth is until Schaaf terms out of the legislature, I don't see a path where that can pass unless there's a referendum clause on it. And a referendum clause means it would be voted on by the people. So as somebody who supports that, would that be something you'd be okay with, of having voters vote on this? Or do you fear that there's no guarantee it would pass, and that's why you wanted to do it through the legislature?
I don't know exactly where I'd be on a referendum, but I think the fact that about half the population of the state of Missouri is now covered by local, county, or city bills. So I think and that's spreading pretty quickly.
It is
across the state. So I think there may be more interest in the Senate to take another look at passing this bill.
Because basically it would govern the unincorporated rural areas where you also have other drug problems, meth problems, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Missouri has this issue.
So we talked about this when we were talking during the campaign, but both you and Donna Behringer are making kind of the transition from being aldermen who basically were part of what I would consider a majority coalition that could get things done in the Board of Aldermen, to being in the super minority. And I know Donna Behringer well. She's been my alderwoman for many years, and I've known you for a while. I think you both are pretty pragmatic people. Neither of you are terribly ideological. I would say that you even kind of trend to be more moderate to conservative Democrats. So my question with that as a backdrop, what's kind of your feeling about going into this new environment where you're not going to be able to get your way all the time, and you're going to really have to work with Republicans to get things done?
Well, that's a good question, Jason. I always looked at myself here in St. Louis as a moderate, but in Jefferson City, I think I'm a liberal. I made a quick transition, apparently.
So would that make Donna Behringer a liberal too?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
If she's listening to the show, I'm sure that she'll laugh a little bit.
Yeah.
And we're going to try to have her on in the coming weeks, but continue.
But I'm a realist, and my interest in politics is getting things done. When I thought about getting into this, I talked to Tom Villa, who was in the House for 18 years, to Jake Hummel, who's been in the House 8 years, and I asked him several questions. That mainly was, will I enjoy Jefferson City in the state legislature? Will I be able to get anything done? given the fact that we have now 46 Democrats out of 163 House members.
10 years ago, you would never have, even 10 years ago, you would never have imagined it, even though the Republicans had control.
30, 40 years, Tom Dillard was the majority leader at the
That's
House.
right.
So continue.
So they both assured me that the answer is yes to those questions, and that even being in a super minority, there are issues, and there are that we can come together on a bipartisan basis, and that's what I plan to do and work towards.
What prompted you, after all these years in the Board of Aldermen, without getting into the details on the switch to the CDA, but still, what prompted you to say, what the heck, I'm going to go to Jeff City and run for this office, and if I get elected, I'm going to go to Jeff City? What made you decide to do that and go to the General Assembly, where the climate is different than in City Hall?
Well, where else was I going to go, Joe?
Well, I don't know.
I could go. I could retire and spend time with my wife, children, and grandchildren, or spend more time with them. I could go back to the Board of Aldermen, or I could go to Jefferson City.
I don't think Beth Murphy would be too happy about that.
No,
but continue.
No, well, no, but my point is, we're in the same decade, I think. What prompted you to say, I could do something there?
Well, again, I talked to I asked the same question. I asked the same question of Tom and Jake, and again, they assured me that that I could get some things done. And I'm going there with realistic expectations. This is a conservative state. We as I said before, we got 46 Democrats out of 163 seats. It's not going to be easy, but I want to be there. I want to be a voice for the city of St. Louis. My main goal, really, overall, is to. I think the disabled and mental health issues are ones that I can work with some Republicans on, but also I want to be there to do everything I can to get whatever resources I can for the city of St. Louis. I think we get short end of the stick when it comes to resources from the state, considering what we send to Jefferson City in the form of tax money. But and I want to be there as a voice that says we want our fair share in one way or another. I'm going to make sure that that's part of my agenda.
So one of the things that I have been following on social media is that your fellow freshmen from both parties have been on this bus tour. I think it ended 4 or 5 days ago, but this had to be the most tweeted out freshman bus tour I've ever seen. I do recall fondly that former Senator Jolie Justice wrote a blog post about her bus tour, but I was seeing this in real time. Like, the bus got stuck at certain points. But you got to go to the zoo, which I'm sure was you've never been to the zoo ever.
Right.
Even though I think your wife was part of the zoo museum district
She
board.
was.
Just tell me a little bit about what it was like to go on this tour, because I think it might be a fascinating thing for the listeners to know.
How long did it go on? Just sort of. And did you guys spend the night in hotels, or what'd you do?
It was 2 weeks. We started in Jefferson City both weeks, ended in Jefferson City both weeks. It started December 5th and finished this past Friday. We went 1,500 miles by bus. We saw state universities. We saw the Air National Guard unit in St. Joseph, the social service agencies here, like St. Patrick's here in St. Louis, the Independent Living Center in St. Louis, Pequod. Spent at Boeing. We spent some time at for-profit corporations, Uber's headquarters in Kansas City, the Kauffman Center in Kansas City, and it was a very it was interesting from my standpoint. I probably knew Saudi Arabia more than the state of Missouri. So it was informative. It was interesting. It was exhausting. But one of the things that really made an impact on me was how much these communities depend on these state universities. In Joplin, for instance, you got Missouri Southern State University.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I didn't know that university existed. It's 6,600 students there, a lot of employees. I mean, without that'd be a big economic hole in Joplin if that university wasn't there. Even though you got Missouri State University in Springfield,
Right, which is
a short drive away.
Yeah, less than an hour.
And you would, from an economic standpoint, an economist might say you ought to consolidate the universities. You ought to put resources into fewer schools, but from a political standpoint and the economic impact that these universities have on these towns. I mean, look at Kirksville and Truman University, tremendous. Or this Air National Guard unit up there in St. Joe's.
Yeah.
Without these things, many of these cities would be, different.
So, did you guys share hotel rooms? Did you get a chance to know some of your
Joe, I don't share hotel rooms.
Well, I'm just asking. I know I don't either, but go ahead.
No, yeah. We stayed at. Believe me, this was not what I would call a luxurious trip, particularly with the food. But the hotels were all nice. We stayed at a Drury. We stayed at Weston. We stayed at they were all nice hotels. We had boxed lunches all the way. Usually had lunch or breakfast if you ate breakfast. I don't.
Yeah, at the
hotel. And then, they fixed us one of our hosts would which were never lobbyists, because if they were lobbyists, it would be a reportable gift. So we stayed away from that sort of thing.
How many people did the tour?
40 newcomers to the House. I think it was 39, 19 Republicans, 20 Democrats, and it was all got along very well, and actually you really didn't. There was no designation. This man or woman is a Democrat or Republican. On the other hand, there was always a designation where you're from. Well, if you're not from St. Louis or Kansas City, you're a Republican.
Yeah, there are,
except for a couple in Columbia.
Yeah. Now I want to ask this question because this came to mind when I saw pictures of your freshman colleagues at the zoo. When you went to some of these places, did they try to sell you on certain pieces of legislation? Because I know the zoo wants to have the ability to do more taxes and get more money, which I have strong opinions about, but I'm not going to go there. But I'm curious if just more generally, when you went to some places like Uber or the zoo or these universities, did they try to say, we want you to focus on this issue or that issue or anything like that?
The answer is yes, some did. The one that comes to mind immediately is the University of Missouri at Kansas City. Their I'll call it their arts, performing arts school needs more room, needs a better facility. Mm-hmm. They took us into their current facility. They took us to the Kaufman Center and showed us which by the way is I thought was gorgeous.
Yeah.
The Kaufman Center. I have not been there.
Yes, it is nice.
I emailed my wife and I told her, find something that we would like in the Kaufman Center in their upcoming events. I want to go back there and see a performance. But anyway, UMKC, they want a new facility, a larger facility, and they're going to. They've got $48 million pledged locally. The state, and I don't know who they really were talking to, but the state, they say, agreed to put up $48 million if they could do that locally. So now they're going to be coming to the legislature this session. They don't expect to get all the money, but I think they want to get some incremental funding.
Well, just when you came back from all this, there's been all this discussion about, the soccer stadium and all this. And so just looking in general, I mean, because you may be ending up, while some things have been postponed, just in general, along with some of the KC stuff, you may be hearing some of these requests. Do you have any general thoughts about that? About whether or not the General Assembly should get into this, or because they used to, or is it something that you think they should focus on other things?
Do you mean, are you talking about sports facilities?
Yes, yeah, sports
facilities.
Because that has been an issue that the legislature has been dealing with, because the Rams situation, they wanted to get involved and Nixon wouldn't let them. And
well,
now,
actually, this goes back 30 years.
But again, there's been times when the legislature has allocated actual money to this, and this seems to be a pretty hot topic. So what's kind of your thought on that?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I think what they talked about in UMKC arts school is different from a sports stadium.
Right. But still, the bottom line, the General Assembly has to decide on this thing.
Yeah. Well, I'll put it this way. I'm not a big proponent of the soccer stadium using tax funds for the soccer stadium. On the other hand, if I get down there and see that, money's funds are going to this to this city and the other cities, then I certainly want St. Louis to get our fair share.
That's understandable. I kind of wanted to shift gears to the political side of things. Before we get into city politics in particular, there was one thing that you got involved in that interested me greatly. Right after you won your primary, you were pretty strongly supportive of Bruce Franks' campaign over incumbent state representative Penny Hubbard. And I actually saw that as although this may be heaping flowery praise on our guest, I saw that as a pretty significant development because, a lot of the people that got behind Bruce Franks were kind of the more progressive, activist-y side. I'm not saying you're not.
I'm not an activist. I'm not a progressive, Jason.
No, I don't. You said to yourself that you're a moderate-ish Democrat. You had been pretty tight with St. Louis Mayor Francis Slate for a while. St. Louis Mayor Francis Slate supported the Hubbards for a long time as well. So I thought when you got behind Bruce Franks, this was kind of a changing of the guard. It might have been a changing of your thinking a little bit. I'm kind of curious, considering he's your new colleague, what prompted you to do that? Because it wasn't just that you endorsed. From what I heard, you went door to door with people. You helped out during that rematch. Mm-hmm. Like, you got pretty heavily involved, and that was seen as a big paradigm shift in city politics. Tell me why you got involved in that.
Well, I think you're right that I did get involved. I did go door to door. I did work at the polls on election day, at rainy election day. I was at Merrimack School. Working for Bruce. Well, I liked H.L. Mencken's quote too, and I've always tried to use this myself, to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And Hubbards were the comfortable folks, and they had been cheating for many years with those absentee ballots. And anybody that looked at elections could see that. But if you don't, I was never, if you don't have and believe me, it didn't affect me one bit, okay? I'm not suggesting that. But it affected other people. And I have a lot of respect for our ability to vote for folks. And any cheating, any fraud really bugs me. And so this, when Bruce filed his lawsuit and the judge said, let's vote again, I thought this is an opportunity for me to make some kind of contribution. I think it wasn't just going door to door for me and working at the polls. The fact that I was going to be an elected official, and had been one, and there weren't any others out there really. I think maybe helped highlight his cause a little bit more. So I was very happy to help him. I've got to know him better over the last 2 weeks, and I think he and I are good friends and on the same page on, I'd say, just about every issue.
And there were some other aldermen that supported him all along. Christine Ingrassia and Kara Spencer were big supporters of him. But I just have to ask, if you knew that the Hubbards were not doing good things in absentee balloting, and I've asked this to other people too, why wasn't there a great outcry like in 2008 or 2010 when Petty Hubbard won her state rep race, or Rodney Hubbard Jr. lost narrowly? Because I think that was my biggest question. If this was happening for so long, how are they able to keep doing it for so long?
Yeah, well,
basically.
I suppose the media ignored it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Mm-hmm. But I know this. You can't file, if you don't have standing, you can't file a lawsuit.
That's true.
And so somebody like Bruce Franks, and luckily he had a good attorney to help him in this cause. You're right, it went on too long, but I think the results have been really neat. First of all, Bruce won, and I think, to me, I think that family's political cloud is about over.
Now, just to give a little perspective, without getting, this has been a problem in the city of St. Louis and elsewhere, but especially in the city, for decades, periodically. There was this huge controversy, indictments, all that in the early 80s, involving the Webby family and some others. So this is not just one family here. And maybe this time this will kind of clear up some of this, but the point is that this has been something that has plagued the city off and on for decades.
Well, when you say off and on, Joe, I'd say that's, the Web. You're talking about with the Webbies. We're talking about the early mid '80s.
Yes.
So we're talking 30 years ago.
Yeah. Yes.
And as far as I've seen,
and people did get indicted and they did go to jail.
Yeah. As far as I've seen, I other than the Fifth Ward, I have not seen this problem.
Yeah. And then, we'll have to see how Tamika Hubbard does in the Fifth Ward reelection, but that's for another time. I want to talk more broadly about city politics because even though you're entering the state legislative arena, I know that you're probably paying attention to the mayor's race and maybe some races for aldermen. I have seen through social media, as I told you before the show, that I think you are backing Lyda Crewson for mayor. Is that correct, first of all?
Yes, that's right.
And this is a pretty large field by historical comparison. When Tom Villa ran for mayor, I think there were only 2 or 3 or 4 candidates.
3. In the end. Three major candidates.
And I would say right now there are 7, and there are 5 that are considered credible candidates for now. We'll see about Bill Haas and Jimmy Matthews in the future. So why Lyda Crewson over all the other candidates?
She's clearly the best person. She would clearly be the best mayor of those that are running. I say that I don't know how long I guess I've known Lida 15 or 20 years, as long as she's been in the Board of Aldermen. But, she has she's a CPA with financial background, with a big development company. She understands finances, both private and public. But on a personal level, she has got a great personal touch. And I think she would be able to work with people from all backgrounds. Mm-hmm. So, and I think she's proven that on the Board of Aldermen. Mm-hmm. I think she's an ideal candidate. I think she's if elected, I think she's going to be the best mayor that. I think she's going to be a terrific mayor.
I think you had to. I don't know if St. Louis Mayor Francis Slay or any of the other living mayors listen to this show, so I know you don't want to insult them.
No. I think Francis Slay's been a terrific mayor. I worked with him, as you know, on the Board of Aldermen for many, many years when he was president of the board. And as mayor, I chaired the HUD's committee, which handles all the major development bills. During his entire tenure. And so we've been, I would say, close politically, and I think he really gets some of the news media. I don't think he gets the full. I don't think they have a full appreciation of the great job that he's done under very, very difficult circumstances.
Well, I think that's been true sometimes of several of the long-term mayors in the city's history, many of whom, they're human, so they had their pluses and minuses. But you look back, and there were many significant achievements, and Mayor Slay obviously deserves accolades for some of his achievements, as did Mayor Tucker, who that's the reason we can see outside, folks, and not have it solid black at midday.
Well, that's
good. Because of Tucker.
Well, I want to talk about the dynamics of this, because you've run citywide before. You ran against two people that are running for mayor right now, Tashara Jones and Jeffrey Boyd. And there was an article in the Post-Dispatch recently about the racial dynamics of this race, that there are 4 African-American candidates, and there are 2 white candidates, but Lida Cruz is considered the only formidable one. And I live in St. Louis Hills, southwest side of the city, which is a heavy vote ward, predominantly white. I could imagine if racial dynamics kind of go as they usually do in this election, does she just have a built-in advantage because there are multiple African-American candidates and only one major white candidate, or do you think it's more complex than that?
Does she have an advantage? Well, first of all, let me say, I think we'll have to see who actually who the final candidates are.
That's why I have held off writing about that part,
true.
Because I wanted to wait till filing ended, because I have seen people pull out in the last days before.
That's true, and that means this analysis could be different, but continue.
Right. But, yeah, sure. In the case, look, if there's 3 white candidates and 1 black candidate, there's an advantage there for the African-American candidate, and the reverse is true. Whether we like it or not, people, the race comes into play in some instances.
And that's the reason I'm bringing it up. I'm not saying that I approve of this occurring. I wish the Southwest side in a multi-candidate race would not vote along racial lines, but if you look at each citywide election, that's what happens. And
but that's true throughout the city.
That's true throughout the city. And, I think if we're talking about a realistic analysis of this race, I don't think we cannot talk about this.
Now, when you ran for city treasurer a few years back, part of that 4-person field, and there was, if I recall right, 2 African Americans and 2 whites, but your race sort of got caught up in this fight between Congressman Lacey Clay and Congressman Russ Carnahan, who had been tossed into the same district. Without reheating all that, I think the battle over that sort of bled down into the city treasurer's race, which I also covered. Was there any experience from that? I mean, takeaway from that you then it's brought forward as you've now going to go to Jeff City? I mean, were there takeaways from that, especially as you look at the mayor's race now?
Nothing new. The dynamics haven't really changed that much over a period of time. I think when I was going into that race in 2012, I knew, we had two concerns. One was the Carnahan Clay race, and how that was going to affect the demographics of the voters.
Yes.
Okay, it was going to bring out more African American voters, and those folks tend to vote for African American candidates, and that was not going to be me. And the other was the primary race for the U.S. Senate that year.
Between Todd Aiken, Sarah Steelman, and John Bruner.
Exactly.
Right.
Thank you.
Because there are because Missouri has open primaries, you have some people, not just in the city but elsewhere, but in the city we're looking at now, who may be voting for Republicans for other offices, who will vote in the Democratic primary, especially for city offices. Well, if the primary is the same time as this hot U.S. Senate race on the Republican side, they have to make a choice.
Yes, I think that was the point you were about to make.
Right. So go ahead.
And I think that's an important point to bring up in this mayor's race, because if you look at, for example, the 16th Ward, which had the highest turnout, you will see a lot of people in the 16th Ward voted for Trump. I guarantee you a large percentage of those Trump voters are going to vote in the mayor's race.
Now, we don't know for who, but
I don't know for who, but to say that those votes don't matter or won't make a difference in a highly divided race is not accurate, because, even if you're a Republican in St. Louis City, you do care who your mayor is or your alderman is, and you probably know it's not going to be a Republican, so you vote in the Democratic primary. So that was a long-winded backdrop, but what's kind of your take on that?
On what?
Oh, I don't know.
Well, on the fact that there's probably going to be a Republican crossover in the mayor's race, and what you experienced, like you were just talking about, how that affected the city treasurer's race back in 2012 because of the hot.
In 2012, there were about 6,000 Republican votes in the city, and had there not been the U.S. Senate seat, the very competitive Republican primary, many of those voters would have voted Democratic, and I would think many of those voters would have voted for me.
Yes.
That's just, I knew, and my advisors knew that those two issues, the Carnahan Clay race and the Republican primary, were things that could cause me some trouble.
And
they did.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it was consequential, but it was certainly a factor.
Yeah.
Well, and it's an interesting history for our listeners to understand.
And it's going to be a dynamic that's not going to be in the mayor's race. So it's important to bring this up.
Because they're going to cross over.
Yes, exactly. So this is why we're bringing this up in a admittedly ham-fisted way, but it's important for people to know.
Speak for yourself.
I'm calling myself ham-fisted, and I apologize to everybody and our guest. Well, we want to thank you very much for coming in here and talking about, what you're going to be doing in Jeff City and city politics. For all of our stories, stlpublicradio.org. Follow me on Twitter at @JRosenbaum. Follow Joe on Twitter at
JMannies, JMannies. And by the way, I go to the zoo a lot.
I do too.
Go ahead.
And where can we find you on the World Wide Web, our Twitter?
Fred Wessels. That's it, isn't it?
I think so.
Yeah, Fred Wessels.
I think that you have tweeted often about movies that you've seen, and it's actually been very helpful to me because I don't see many movies very often. And your opinion does matter. So,
well, that's great to know,
yeah.
Jason. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you and Joe.
All right. Well, until next time, so long.
The day destroys the night. Night divides the day. Try to run, try to hide. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side. Break on through to the other side, yeah.
The Gateway brings you the day's news from the St. Louis region and across Missouri. It also includes stories from the Illinois side of the river and our Metro East reporter, Will Bauer.
In Alton, in Belleville, in East St. Louis, in Edwardsville, in Cahokia Heights, at Scott Air Force Base, I'm Will Bauer. St. Louis Public Radio.
Listen to reports from Will and all of our journalists weekdays on The Gateway, on the STLPR app, and wherever you get podcasts.